The purpose of this conversation and future conversations on this channel is education, understanding, and growth. I have no intention of hostility and wish for all parties involved or discussed to live happy, fruitful lives. To outline my background, I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I support the teachings of David T. Friedman, Russell Brand, and Michael Malice. Today, my guest is Aaron Penney. Would you like to say a brief outline of what you believe in your current political activities?
Yeah, so my name is Aaron. I would identify most closely as a progressive Democrat. So in the past, like I did some work on political campaigns. I've done a lot of volunteering with political campaigns. Currently, I help out a little bit with like local volunteering with races. So that involves phone banking, knocking on doors, that sort of thing. I'm very passionate about local politics and, helping more progressive people get elected in my community.
Yeah, that's awesome. I always like it when people, are actually like involved and pursuing the things that they actually believe in, because a lot of people don't. They're just talk, or they're all just like repeating buzzwords, which is just not helpful. And it's like most of the time they're just trying to be rude.
Or like a lot of complaining, and it's like, you have a chance to do something.
Yeah, for sure. So to get into the questions here, do you trust major news media, be it CNN, MSNBC, to give you factual information?
It's kind of an interesting thing. It's not necessarily what I would call a distrust, but I find that, with a lot of media, especially like on TV, sometimes it sensationalizes a lot of the truth to the point where, it's hard to, get like some objective truths out of things, because, we like things to be entertaining. We like things to be sensationalized. So more often than not, I try to like get my news from, more print sources. Like I really like NPR, things that don't tend to sensationalize like CNN. Um, but I think for the most part, like, networks like CNN can get things right. It's just, it's not the first place I would get my news. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Generally speaking, I think when I can like go to CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, when I can find the things that line up, I'm like, okay, so there's the actual truth. If they're all saying the same thing, it's like, oh no, no. So that one line they said, that's the right one.
Mhm.
Uh, it's funny. I remember back, I guess it's over a year ago now, on the January 6th thing. I was flipping through the news networks when that all that was going on, and I'm not saying this is consistent, but at the time, MSNBC was the only network that was actually just saying what was going on. Fox News was saying, "Oh, this is why it's going on. Here's my opinion on it." CNN was doing the same thing, and I was like, "I don't want this. I just want to know what is happening."
Exactly, and that's another issue, like, I have with a lot of things is, like, I would like some, objective reporting of, like, what's actually going on, but a lot of times, like, what you'll get is, like, pundits giving their opinions on things, and that's not necessarily what people need all the time.
Yeah, especially in news. I don't understand why it's basically reality television, honestly. Why do we have major news outlets that have completely opposite views on current events? Is it necessary?
Yeah, that's another thing that I can find very frustrating too. I think, part of it is that a lot of these things are funded by like corporations that like may have their own agenda behind things. So like it can be hard to get the truth when, a lot of these things can be spun to fit like a certain agenda for like the sake of, you know, whatever funding like whatever sponsor might get. Um, so that's one factor that can play into it. Another thing is like, they may just play into like whatever they know like fits in with their audience, whatever gets eyeballs on the TV. Um, So, it can, especially like in this day and age where it's where like, we expect a lot of this stuff for free. Like no one pays for a newspaper or anything like that anymore.
Hmm.
Um, so, they like people try to find ways to like, you know, get eyeballs on things like, and they'll, resort to whatever it takes. So,
That's another thing that people can forget sometimes is that those networks and stuff, it's a business. And sometimes they're just trying to figure out the best way for them to still make profit.
yeah, exactly. So that's something else to keep in mind. Like when it comes to like consuming media, like, we always need to do so critically and think about like, where is this coming from? Like, what's the aim of what I'm seeing here? Because sometimes like we might be seeing something factual, but we also need to ask ourselves like, what story am I being told with what I'm seeing?
Mhm. It's hard to take things like and having to interpret every single thing somebody's saying. I wish it didn't have to be that way, but it just kind of is where we're at.
Yeah, exactly.
So, do you think that in America, do you believe that the two-party system is broken, or how do you feel about the two-party system?
With the two-party system, I think that's certainly something that like has become a point of frustration because especially like in more left-leaning circles like my own, where like there's a lot of like tension between, people who are like more moderate versus like more left wing, is that like we're trying to decide like which direction like the Democratic Party goes into, whether or not there should be like a third left party that should like get more energy into it. I think that people, should be allowed more options. Um, as for what that would look like, though, like that's something where I kind of hit a wall. So it's one of those things where it's like I'm critical of it, but I don't know quite what a solution would look like.
Sure. Yeah, it is tough, but it when you have people that are like, um, somebody who's more of a centrist left and somebody who's extremely far left politically, and they both have to be on the same ticket, it's not really fair.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially yeah, when a lot of people like these are their values, they take it very seriously. So like, having to like, swallow the medicine like every election, like people get sick of that.
Hmm. And it can be especially well, it can be a deciding factor if you're somebody who's like a one or two subject voter. Like you vote purely on this basis. It's like you only have the choice of one party.
Mhm.
It's like how
Exactly.
you it's like if you're like pro-life or pro-choice, it's you have to vote one way or the other.
Exactly. And, I know a lot of people who like, they have one issue that they're like, that's the issue that they're very passionate about, but they still aren't satisfied with like, some of the solutions that either party is proposing because they're like, that's not necessarily in line with what I think is the best solution. So they find themselves like extremely frustrated too.
I feel like it's breaking down in a ways because people are getting so frustrated with it, but I don't know what it'll turn into.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think we're reaching like a point of reckoning with it, but what'll come of it, I don't know.
Mhm. So, do you feel like voting is important?
Yes, absolutely. As flawed as our system can be, I think that voting is, the most important way to make sure that we participate in our system and make sure our voice is heard. I'm a huge proponent of making sure that voting is more accessible for people. I've, done efforts in the past to like knock on doors and make sure that people are registered to vote because, it's something that I'm extremely passionate about.
Yeah, for sure. Getting your voice heard is such a big deal. Do you feel that it's important to vote even in like if you're casting a red vote but you have a predominantly blue state, do you still feel that voting is important in that case?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think like, for example, like I'm a very progressive person in a very red state. I'll vote in every election because, I think like the only way to change the tide is if every person makes sure their voice is heard. And like if I'm not doing my part, then I can't, talk about like what changes I want made.
A little bit of a different topic,
Well,
but what role do you feel the government should play in stopping homelessness?
and stopping homelessness. So this is actually something that was like part of what I studied when I was in grad school for social work.
Yeah.
So what studies support is that housing first initiatives are, the most effective ways to combat homelessness. So, what happens is that, if we can find ways to fund housing for people for who are homeless to like be able to have housing first, we find that other things fall in line. Like they're able to have a permanent address so that they can find jobs, have bank accounts, like be able to do all the things that they need to sustain themselves and become, like participating like members of society that like, everyone should have the chance to be.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot of factors involved in homelessness that people don't consider, especially factors that require a permanent address, like you said, like opening a bank account. It's like you need a bank account to get a job. McDonald's is not going to pay you in cash. Um,
Exactly.
so it's like they can't just go get a job. They need so much more before that even happens.
Exactly. People need like if you think about all the things that it takes in order to like set up employment. It requires, all these barriers that people who are homeless just don't have access to.
Mhm. Did the government do too much or not enough the past 2 years to help stop the spread of this COVID-19?
I feel like there could have been more done initially in order to prevent the spread of COVID-19. I feel like, we could have, more aggressively like instituted, social distancing and masking measures across the board. I think leaving it up to the states to, decide each, like, kind of made things inconsistent,
Mhm.
especially like in a country like the US where it's like we're crossing state lines all the time. So, of course, there's going to be like a wider rate of infection, like a lot more infection because like we aren't on the same page here.
Mhm.
So I think a more unified front would have been a better way to go about it.
Yeah, for sure. It was something unprecedented, and maybe we'll do better next time if there is a next time.
I was like,
Um,
please don't next time.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, hopefully like there's lessons learned.
And obviously, that whole segment to say that neither of us are medical professionals, so and we don't claim to be, and
Yeah.
we're just trying to think of the best way to handle it as citizens. So, if there's a politician that you vote for, wins their election, you agree with everything they said on their campaign trail, do you trust this person to carry out their promises?
It's hard to say. It depends. I think a lot of what it comes down to is the fact that, we have a system where, things progress so slowly because it's not just up to like one person who's in charge. It's, up to a whole system of checks and balances and how we navigate through that. So, if someone that I like is elected president, like we still have to like get things passed through Congress, depending on what that looks like. There's still the Supreme Court who has deciding factors on that. So there's like a lot of different factors that go into that. And but that's also to say like I've been disappointed by a few people I voted for in the past, quite honestly. But yeah, like it's one of those things where like I think a lot of people who go into politics like go into it with the best of intentions, um and hopefully like they're able to stick to what they say, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, it's hard to. It can be really hard to trust politicians, even when you agree with everything they say on their campaign trail. Because just a lot of them, some of them are in it for the right reasons and they're trying to do the right thing. But some of them are just in it for the status of it and the power. And so they'll just say whatever they need to get there.
Yeah, and there's also like a lot of corporate lobbying too that can go into it, which is an issue. So,
There's a lot of, I think more than people realize, there's so much like business and government just intertwined that people don't realize it, but it's so there. It's so there, like on all sides of it.
exactly.
It's like there was a, I can't name names because I don't remember, but I happen to know there was a lot of like people in government that made a lot of money over COVID-19 because they had investments in certain stocks before everything went down.
Oh, I know, it's crazy. Like and it blows my mind that people can, make money off of something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I think a lot of them are, I won't say a lot of them, but some of them are definitely in it just for the money and status. Because people are people. And I think that's one thing that I feel a lot of people don't realize is that as human beings, we're flawed. And no matter who you vote into office, no matter what you agree with, people are going to do what they're going to do. That's how I feel about like drug laws. It's like if somebody's going to smoke pot, they're going to smoke pot, whether it's legal or not. So
Yeah,
I feel like making it illegal is kind of dumb, kind of pointless.
exactly. Like, and there's no reason for people to be sitting in jail over something like that too.
Oh, for sure. No, the drug laws are not where they should be right now.
Yeah.
Um, Even though I heard there was a bill going through that's trying to go through right now, legalizing marijuana everywhere, if I'm not mistaken.
Really. Yeah, I know that there's a bill that they were trying to push through in Tennessee. I don't know the status of it, where they were trying to make Delta 8 illegal, which I'm like, it's Delta 8.
Oh, illegal? Oh,
Yeah, like come on now.
I feel like we just made the progress of opening up all these CBD stores.
Exactly. It's pretty mild.
Frankly, it's hurting local business. That's not a joke.
Mm,
So that would not be cool in my book for sure.
yeah, exactly.
So on the note of business people, and maybe particularly relating to their power over politics, do billionaires have a moral responsibility to share their wealth? Should they have a legal responsibility to share their wealth?
Yeah, I'm, of the opinion that like, I don't think that people should be able to get to that point in the first place, because I think the only way that people can get there is, through benefiting from exploitative practices, through like a lot of tax loopholes.
Mhm.
Um, and, I think that people who have those kind of resources, especially in a country like the US, where we're probably like the wealthiest nation in the world, yet we still have, issues with homelessness and poverty. There's no reason that those should exist if, we have people with that amount of wealth. There's no moral reason for it, I don't think.
There are some people who have like a ton of money and they donate a lot of it, and good on them. But it is definitely a rare occurrence. Um, so that's an interesting thought to me that you just said, that you feel that it's not possible to acquire that amount of wealth without some kind of like evil or corruption happening.
Yeah, because, it is possible to, become wealthy like without, being exploitative, but
Hmm.
just the sheer amount that $1 billion is, like that's more money than like several generations of a person's family can spend.
Right.
an unfathomable amount. So like the only way that can be acquired is by, benefiting from people who are not being like properly compensated for their labor,
Mhm.
uh, which is, something that is very, frustrating to me.
Sure. No, that's a very interesting take on it. I've never thought about it in that manner. There's a quote from Calvin Coolidge, our 30th president. It says, "To live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race." How do you feel about this quote?
I don't say that I fully agree with that. Um, I would say that, I have a lot of belief in this country because like I I wouldn't be, working so hard to want to improve it if I didn't. I think
Mhm.
that, there's a lot of great things about this country. But at the same time, there's a lot of flaws, especially, when it comes to like the way we were originally designed. I don't think we were originally designed in a very equitable way. But I think, part part of, what can be great about us is that like we can be very self-reflective and we do have the ability to adapt to make things more equitable.
Mhm.
Um, so, that's kind of where I stand on things is that, I think like if we continue to like, lean into our ability to be adaptable and evolving, like I think that's what's great about us.
Yeah, for sure. So you would, and making an assumption here, you would not consider yourself somebody who treats the founding fathers as deities, as some people have a tendency to do.
Afraid not. Like I think Hamilton kind of slaps, but not for me.
Yeah, yeah. Lin-Manuel Miranda, he's the real founding father.
Yes, yes.
So, and this is off topic, but I I've started to, I'm on a journey to figure out where I ultimately land politically. I have, you know, anarcho-capitalism is where I definitely stand at the moment. But I'm trying to constantly evolve, trying to constantly learn. Along that journey, I'm starting to kind of consider myself like a radical humanitarian. What I mean by that is I think that there's a lot of stuff that people focus on in the media and like with all the buzzwords and topics that people like to talk about with individual rights and stuff like that. That stuff is important, but I feel like people don't consider enough. We should be talking about homelessness and hunger and clean water before we're talking about, the semantics of certain things. Semantics are can be important in some aspects, but I think there's a distraction. I think they can be a distraction from things that are actually like real problems that are happening in our own country that we don't talk about.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about like what you would, like to see more of.
Well,
'Cause
I'd like to see I'd like to see more people, basically trying to do the right thing by the human race. It's like I like a lot of what Ayn Rand says, but I don't agree with the objectivist viewpoint of you should do everything selfishly, and that's kind of the purpose of life. That's kind of the objectivist view. Um, and I don't agree with that. Maybe that's 27 years of superhero movies in me, but that we should help out our fellow human being. And I'm trying to assess that if that's just what's happening. Um,
I think, and I think you're right on. Like, I think human beings, for the most part, are just naturally cooperative and collaborative creatures. I think part of what should inform our values is our empathy. And if we let go of that, then we're letting go of, a huge piece of, what makes us human, what can make this world a better place. So, if we aren't letting our morality or our values be guided by that, then, so I think that's a good place to start.
I wish that people would talk more about, like, I don't even know if Flint, Michigan ever got clean water. I don't know if they're still in that bad place. There's a sex slave trade happening across the United States that people don't talk about. Maybe they just don't want to talk about it. I don't know. But I think they'd rather talk about, stupid stuff like being kicked out of an Applebee's because you have a rebel flag tattoo or something dumb like that. It's like we should be focusing on more important things here.
I know. Yeah. And as a social worker, I've worked with, a lot of, vulnerable people like, sex trafficking survivors, homeless folks. And, it's very, difficult to see those issues get ignored, just especially like in the larger discussion of things when these are very solvable problems that we have the resources and ability to address.
And that's one reason that I started doing these videos is just, I just want to show everybody that we can come together and actually do some good here. We don't have to always be bickering and fighting. People from all sides can come together on some things and actually make a difference. But sometimes they just refuse to.
Yeah, like ultimately, like this sounds kind of cheesy, but I think there's a lot more that brings us together than sets us apart. And I think that's what we need to look at and join on. Yeah.
But I mean, because throughout this call, as you identify more as a progressive leftist, and I'm, very anti-government, pro-free market, there's a lot of things that we agree on. We might have different ways of getting there, but it's important to see that we're trying to get to the same place.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, it's that like key piece of like that humanitarian empathy, which is like the most important part. So like, even if there's like different paths, important to like have these conversations for sure.
Yeah. And I also believe that sometimes people can do the right thing for the wrong reason, but it's still the right thing in the end. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Erin, thank you so much for being on here. I really appreciate it. Would you like to shout out any charities or organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see here. Oh man, I've forgotten everything that I'm passionate about and I feel bad now. Yeah. One organization that I'm passionate about is the Southern Poverty Law Center. If y'all could check them out, they do a lot of, good research on like hate groups throughout the US. So if y'all could like give a look at them, they're a fantastic organization standing up for equality. So
awesome. I'll definitely be putting that link in the description.
Yeah.
And let's see here. And I have links below in the description from myself to private charities that help out your fellow human beings. But after that, thank you, Erin. And thank you all for listening.
All right. Thanks for having me.